Hello everybody, today we are going to be, if I'm correct, we're going to be looking at a video and argument from a Jesus mythicist, and we are going to be completely owning him, just completely wrecking him. And I'm not going to be doing that because I know absolutely nothing about history. I'm mostly just going to say in the back and be like, yeah, you get him, Gabe, because Gabe is the person here who knows about history. And we're just going to kind of look at these videos. JC and Gabe will kind of look over them, give arguments against it, show why it's incorrect. Now I'm going to sit there in the background and be like, yeah, that's pretty cool. And that's pretty much what's going to go on in this stream. So hope you guys enjoy. I'll let Gabe and JC take it from here.
Chris, can you not? You're going to get us copyrighted.
No, I'm not. This you
At least he has to. I guess he has to credit the song then.
Huh?
Doesn't he have to credit? Don't we have to post a credits to the song artist now if he's got song playing in the background?
Yeah, pretty easy. Just credit The Weeknd, House of Balloons, The Last Table Girls from the album House of Balloons, released in 2011, but re-released that I'm listening to right now on Apple Music in 2009.
Yeah, post that in a comment.
Winter.
Mute.
Oh, your wants to leave.
Okay.
Mute him.
And go. Oh shit! Here it is.
Mute him because we can't play the video over his music.
Wait. Gabe, what was the video?
Just look up the history. Or did Jesus exist?
I'm just messing with you guys. No more music.
Woo! That was actually kind of good.
It was good, but we're going to get copyrighted, and I really don't want to have to deal with that.
It's really good. You guys should listen to it on your own time.
I listen to more rock and country than that, though.
That's true. I like rock and country. All right, here we go. We got to listen to the song.
I listen to all kinds of music. I listen to good music. I listen to bad music.
You
listen to no music.
Oh man, if one of us gets good at editing, we should make that elephant philosophy video where he reviewed Richard Carrier, put clips in like that.
This video was 48 minutes long.
What?
Look at the length of the video when you chose it.
Yes, I did.
I don't think you did.
I did. 12-hour stream.
All right, here we go.
I don't have school tomorrow. Yeah. Fucking out to that song.
Can we just skip this, please?
Hi, I'm Dan Barker, and welcome to another FFRF's Ask an Atheist.
And I'm Annie Laurie Gaylor, and we are co-presidents of the Freedom from Religion Foundation, working to keep religion and government separate. And we've done a lot of shows about state church separation lately, but we also want to educate the public about the views of non-theists, atheists, agnostics, and so on. And so on today's show, we're going to examine the question, did Jesus exist?
And you'll be able to join in our discussion. You can ask us the question by typing a comment right here on Facebook or by sending an email to Ask an Atheist.
Skip over his.
Who is the wife of the Egyptian free.
An exaggeration. Many scholars say that it's Testament, which is a flash convention.
Yeah, there it is.
So, Dan, did Jesus exist?
Well, okay, so that's our topic. Did Jesus exist? Well, it depends on what Jesus you're talking about. Jesus of the New Testament, which is a character in a story, or the actual Jesus of history. So most scholars would say that it's most probable that the Jesus of the New Testament did not exist. That character is an exaggeration. Many scholars say that it is probable that there was a historical Jesus after whom that New Testament myth was based, although many scholars say no, there was, that it's very probable that there was not an actual historical Jesus.
Who are these many scholars?
I find it so fascinating that people can just go
That's
up.
a lie.
Like the fact that people that you can just go up, make a video in front of so many people that you know a lot of people are going to watch, people who might not be very educated on this, whose knowledge on this might be fairly indigent, and they are going to you to know more about this topic, to learn your perspective, to know the facts from the scholars, and you go up and you just lie to their face. Just, man, like the fact that he just goes up there and he just says things that are not true, that are just blatantly false, like that's crazy to me.
Yeah, he's gonna say a lot of I watched the first 15 minutes yesterday, and a lot of it is really it is blatantly false. Anybody who has a general understanding of the topic would say that this is blatantly false.
What he's saying aren't even bad arguments or just stupid objections. These things are just wrong. They're false. It is factually incorrect. Okay, but anyway, continue the video so Gabe can own him.
Yeah, no. So it's not even like a 75-25% majority thing. It's like a 99.98% majority, and then you got like the 0.2% that don't even work at college. Even they don't even go to community colleges. There's 6 quote unquote scholars. 2 have PhDs that deny Jesus exists, and that's really it. So this quote unquote many is really like 2 people.
All right, we're gonna continue.
And they give good reasons. The ones who say no, they're usually called mythicists because they think the whole thing's a myth. There was no Jesus at all. Right now, they are in a minority of scholarship, but they have very strong arguments, and we want to talk about those arguments, why there is doubt. Keeping in mind that
no, they don't.
No historical claim can ever be 100% yes or 0% no. It's always a matter of probabilities. I think we're on pretty safe ground. Critical scholars, not evangelical people who read the New Testament, but critical scholars say that Jesus of the New Testament did not exist and could not have existed. Although
the video.
This first century self-proclaimed.
Okay, Gabe, we're gonna have to go for longer than about 30 seconds.
Yeah, that's true. But I just wanted to say it depends on what he means by critical scholars, because the only critical scholars he's going to listen to are the ones who agree with him already. And he was pretty much making it out like no Christian scholar is quote unquote critical, which is really false. Because
Dale Allison.
Yeah, Dale Allison. I guess you can throw James D.G. Dunn in there, but I don't know if he was like a Christian.
Dale Allison is so based. I love that man.
I need to get his book.
Yeah, I really want to get what is it? The Resurrection of Jesus: Apologetics, Polemics, and History. I really want to because it's supposed to be like a comprehensive analysis of the resurrection. The arguments.
Oh yeah, it's the best. It's the best case for the resurrection and the best case against the resurrection.
From it,
no. So it's not a case. It's not a case against it. It's a case. Allison's view is that it's what Homer calls resurrection hypothesis B, where it's like Jesus did raise from the dead, but it was more like spiritual than it was physical.
But no, the thing is, Dustin Crummett, he's an analytic philosopher, younger guy. He makes arguments for the soul. Really awesome guy. But somebody asked on Facebook, said, "What is the best book for and against the resurrection?" He said, "Best book for Dale Allison's Resurrection of Jesus: Apologetics, Polemics, and History." Best book against the Resurrection of Jesus, Apologetics, Polemics, and History, right? So both of them, that specific book.
He just makes a case. He makes a really good case against the resurrection from a bunch of scholarship, and then makes a good case for the resurrection from a bunch of scholarship. And he disses both sides. He's like, "You're an idiot. You're an idiot."
He's the only guy.
I feel bad for him because he's getting attacked from both sides. He's he's like the dude in the middle. It's like walking into the middle of
And that's kind of where I am right now. I'm like Dale Allison.
He's
now.
Yeah,
only
I know.
good enough to debunk himself. No man has done it before, but damn man, Dale Ellison has
It's like
debunked
Cosmic Skeptic. No, it's like
video.
somebody. It's like nobody debunks Cosmic Skeptic. All right, fine, I'll do it myself.
Well, actually, his first video was pretty bad, which is why he debunked it.
Yeah, he's not a Christian now, but he said
No,
like
he's
all
like-
my objections.
But he's like
The only, yeah,
he's getting closer and closer to theism. And I think I think soon he will eventually cave and be a theist.
as soon as somebody can provide a reasonable response to animal suffering, I think that will make a big.
We got
difference.
sidetracked. We better get on with this video.
Suffering is
Yeah.
that animals
Let's
do
not stop until like the let's let it play for like 5 minutes at least.
Suffering is an illusion.
Oh my! Just don't even.
The world is an
Messiah. There were a
illusion.
bunch of others. There was a guy named Judas the Christ in the 1st century BC. There was a self-proclaimed Messiah named Theudas the Christ. There was an Egyptian Jew Messiah. So there might have been this guy named Yeshua the Christ. You can't prove that he didn't exist. He might have been there, who was the kernel of the story that later grew into this exaggerated New Testament legend.
So you're saying there could have been a man who thought he was Christ, and then this legend grew around him.
Yeah, there might have been this self-proclaimed Messiah who might have been crucified, and that's historians give some high probability that could have happened, and it's the kind of thing that the Jewish early Christians would not have reported. So the crucifixion of this character does seem to ring true for history, although it doesn't mean that he was a miracle worker who walked on water and who rose from the dead. It just means that there might have been one of these Yeshua. It wouldn't have been Jesus, but it could have been Yeshua, which was Joshua. However, the mythicists have a lot of good arguments why we should lower the probability. We can't say no for sure, but one of the reasons is that in the 1st century, when these New Testament stories were written, there is no external confirmation for the story outside of the New Testament itself. There were a whole bunch of people writing. In fact, the early Roman Empire, that 1st century, was pretty well documented. There was Philo of Alexandria. There was later Josephus came on. There was a lot of people writing things. Nobody noticed this Jesus character during his lifetime or even in decades afterwards. There was no stories about it, no contemporary secular writers about it. It's only much later. So that's one of the reasons why we would lower the probability of Jesus existing as a historical person.
So our videographer wants to know, who was Josephus?
Well, Josephus. Okay, Josephus was a Roman Jew who wrote some books about Jewish history, the antiquities of the Jews and the wars of the Jews. And Josephus wrote his writings around the year 90 to 100, which would have been at least 60 years after the events. So in Josephus, in this big long thing, the antiquities of the Jews, there's this one tiny little paragraph where he does mention Jesus. There was a man named Jesus. But first of all, that's pretty late. It hardly qualifies as contemporary. It came much, much later. And secondly, that little paragraph was most likely interpolated. It was inserted later. It doesn't even show up in his writings until the 4th century. So it looks like Christians doctored the writings of Josephus to put this little paragraph about Jesus in there.
Because it's totally out of character with the rest of the chapter.
It's inserted
passage.
in a really weird place. It's in a kind of a later language, and it says he was the Christ. But Josephus was a Messianic Orthodox Jew, and if he really thought Jesus was the Christ, he would have devoted more than a couple sentences in his thing to it. That would have been like earth-shattering. So most scholars are pretty sure Josephus didn't.
All right, so I think that was
Gabe.
long enough. What?
Gabe, it's a monk.
Okay, so the first point, and this is something that really is all over Tim O'Neill's blog, and he talks about it a lot on Twitter. He explodes on people on Twitter when they talk about that first point. Actually, I've witnessed that firsthand. So he he's making the point that I think David Fitzgerald makes, where he's like lists all these people that don't mention Jesus, and so he's like, it's not probable that he existed until you look at what these people are writing about. They weren't writing like some of them were musicians, some of them are poets. Like they're not writing history. Philo of Alexandria. The interesting thing about him is that he is kind of excluded from most Jews. Like he doesn't really. Most Jews don't really consider him like an influential writer, and they don't consider him very important. So I don't know why he would mention that. He Another point is that this is just an argument from silence. Arguments from silence can be used properly, but he doesn't use if you have a reason to expect someone to write about something and they don't, then you can kind of use that as a probability thing, although most historians don't really like that because of instances like what's his name, Marco Polo, when he rides up to when he goes on his journeys to China, he doesn't mention the Great Wall. I mean, and you'd expect him to, so you could use that as an argument to kind of show the Great Wall didn't exist. The same way he's trying to use it for Jesus, which is just absurd. Regarding Josephus, the 4th century thing is complete. I think Dan has got his memory mixed up here. So the actual argument that people put forward is that it's not quoted until the 4th century, and the reason my response to that version is that we don't expect the Christians to need to quote him because there were no mythicists during that time. And Josephus' original passage really just says that Jesus was crucified and his followers believed in him after he was dead. And he says that it's I think he said that it's generally accepted that this passage is a forgery and that it was inserted later. That's not actually the consensus of Josephus specialists. It's actually quite the opposite. The majority view of Josephus scholars is that this passage, while it has some additions from Christians, it has a historical kernel. And
so, are you talking? Hold on. Are you talking about the Testimonium, or are you talking about some of the other places it mentions Jesus?
That's another point to make. There are 2 references to the Jesus of the Bible in Josephus, and he doesn't mention the first one, which I don't know why he wouldn't mention it. I'm not going to say it's dishonest or anything, but he mentions his brother James, who was executed, who was the pastor, and he talks about him being, I don't remember the exact wording. It's on Tim. This is a passage that Tim O'Neill likes to use a lot, but he says that he was beheaded and he was brother of the one called the Christ, which is obviously another reference to Jesus. So he mentions him at least twice. Dan didn't mention that. The testimonium is what he was talking about, and as I said, the scholarly consensus or majority is that it has some Christian additions in it, but a lot of the text is very anti-Christian-like, and it more than likely represents a historical. It more than likely represents a partial authenticity view, and there's a lot of other arguments that they would use, there's a early church father who's quotes Josephus somewhat. And when he quotes him about Jesus, he doesn't use any of the language, he was the Messiah. He doesn't. His quotation of Josephus doesn't include that, which means it's probably likely that he had a version of Josephus that didn't include the Christian editions at all. He said that it doesn't really fit well in that passage. I don't know why he would say that. Josephus does go on sidebars a lot. And he said that it's not really. He said it uses later language. That's just stupid. Because it doesn't seem to me to use later language. It seems to be very Josephine in style. So, that's my general issues with his statements.
All right, we can continue.
Didn't write that at all.
The Christ is actually a title.
Yeah.
When you hear the word Jesus Christ, that's not a name, that's a title. Jesus.
Yeah,
Christ, the Christ is the title.
The anointed one, the Messiah. Although Josephus, that little paragraph does say the word Jesus. Although there are a lot of good reasons why scholars doubt the authenticity of that.
Well, so to sum it up, there is no accepted historical account that's contemporaneous when Jesus was supposed to have lived, that he lived.
Or any time in the
So
entire...
that seems a little bit odd.
Yeah, in the whole first century, even 60 years after, there's nothing except what the Bible writers themselves say. So the New Testament stories, they are evidence. I mean, something happened. They didn't just, totally invent it. Something must have happened.
So there's no confirmation in history. But also, can't you argue, you're talking about a person who was deluded, who thought he was the son of a god, might have been wandering around the desert, making claims.
There were a bunch of those.
Yes, and
There
so
were people
any of
like
those
that.
could have perhaps seeded this New Testament mythology.
Yeah, they could have been the template after whom this later myth was based. And one could parallel for that is the story of Paul Bunyan. Paul Bunyan, was this
What?
Okay, so I dropped out for like the last 2 minutes. I had to do something for my family really quick. Could you guys update me on what just happened?
He basically just said that Paul Bunyan was like he's gonna start listing all these apocalyptic prophets from that time period.
I loved right when you said, I don't think that the text was interpolated because there were no mythicists back then. That's when I left.
Basically, Gabe was just saying how if we take out what we think to be the Christian add-ons, then it reminds us very Josephine like. It's very it sounds very much like what Josephus or how Josephus wrote, basically.
And that Eusebius, when he quotes the testimonium, he doesn't use any Christian editions, which which obviously would be very good for apologetic purposes during that time. So why wouldn't he use those? And it seems likely that his version that he's quoting doesn't have the additions in it.
All right, let's continue with this masterpiece.
Continue owning him, getting debunked.
Northwoods Canadian lumberjack, his big lumberjack, and we all know the story about Paul Bunyan with his big ox, and he dug the Great Lakes as a watering hole for his ox. So I think pretty much everybody agrees that the Paul Bunyan story is legendary, that he didn't exist, but you can't prove that there was not an actual Paul Bunyan. There might have been. The stories were written 40 to 50 years after the events when the French were fighting the British. So there might have been a guy named Paul Bunyan who was a big lumberjack who did some amazing things. But later, this story based on him comes along, and it's obviously
The
mythological.
legend based on him.
Yeah, it's a legend. It's a story you can read. Is it true or not? I mean, is it a fun story, or is there some truth? So there, in the legends of Paul Bunyan, there might be a little tiny bit of truth. There might have been an actual man.
But nobody has a record of such a thing.
No, there's no record of
So
that.
it's very parallel with Jesus.
Yeah, so you can make the same parallel. The New Testament stories are like the stories of Paul Bunyan. They're interesting stories, and they have these kind of weird stuff in them that you can laugh and say that really didn't happen. But that doesn't disprove that there was an actual historical person on whom that myth was.
So I think he's answered the question already, but this is just going to extend for like 48 minutes. He's literally saying, okay, so when the question is very vague, it says, did Jesus really exist? They never did the Christian Jesus really exist, or did
Only one Jesus, and that's the Jesus that was God incarnate and rose from the dead. Anyways,
they never specify. It's a very blanket statement. So I think he's already answered it. Honestly, he's saying, okay, well, we can't really. There was probably a guy named Jesus who might have claimed to be the Messiah, but the Gospels don't accurately portray that. Which is what most skeptics would say. I think that's what Bart Ehrman says, that he believes there was a historical Jesus. There was a guy who claimed to be the Messiah, but he doesn't think that all these events happened. So I think he's answered it already. It's like 48 minutes of him just saying the same thing.
Well, he's gonna lay out some mythicist arguments, and he really, from what I've seen, he's gonna like start going on to the parallels thing in a minute. So yeah, best argument from for the testimonium is it's low Christology. That's also a good point to make, because if a Christian added that on, then they would like, instead of just being like perhaps, because we're talking about the original now, so instead of saying perhaps he was the Messiah, it would have been like, bam, he was the Son of God, he resurrected from the dead. You better believe it, or you're going to hell, or something like that. It wouldn't be as vague as it is.
If we take out the Christian add-ons.
Yeah, there's also a lot of verbiage in there that is really like, Christians didn't like to use some of the clauses that he uses in there. So, and that's actually what I was doing in the book. That's what I highlighted and read and stuff like that, and stuff that they wouldn't have used. But that's not really important right now.
All right, let's continue.
Based. There's also a lot of Christians, apologists will point to other non-biblical extra New Testament sources that mention the Christ in the 2nd century, and like Pliny and Suetonius and Tacitus. They wrote like in the years 117, 118, and later. And you can find a bunch of 2nd century writings about Jesus, even by people who didn't like him. You can find Jewish writings debunking the story. And what the apologists say is that, well, if they're debunking the story, he must have existed, or they wouldn't have been writing about him. But these are really late. These are a century or more later, and not one of them uses the word Jesus.
So, just to address this really quick, he's saying, well, they're a century late. Most writings that we know of that, let's, for example, most of our major ancient historical characters, how we know they existed is from sources 1, 2, 3 centuries later. So it's not uncommon to take a source a century later and say, okay, we have evidence he existed. So I think this is kind of putting up a double standard almost. That
like you have to. It depends on the source, though.
Yeah, and it depends on how accurate the source is. Tacitus was known to be very, very accurate. Suetonius was pretty accurate. Some of these other guys, and then you have the church fathers, although that's usually discounted because, they were Christians, but I would put them in as some type of evidence too.
Yeah. A good example of that, I guess, is Alexander the Great, because most of the sources that we use to study him come like 400 years later. And the reason why we use those sources is because they gathered like data that they had available to them earlier from earlier sources and used those, which is what I think Tacitus did with his mention to Christ. But I'll lay out my reasons for that later.
Yeah, we can continue.
Jesus. They all mention a Christ figure. And in fact, Tacitus writes about this Christus person, not a Christos. So they're really grasping at straws by saying, and you can read a long list of like 20 different names of people who mention Jesus outside the New Testament. But remember, those are all really late, after the Christian religion had already come into prominence. So obviously there's going to be writings about the religion later.
Well, so let's get more to the heart of the Jesus that's portrayed in the New Testament. Internally, aren't there many reasons why someone would doubt the existence of such a person?
Yeah. So there's a lot of contradictions. The lack of historical confirmation lowers the probability, and the presence of internal contradictions in the story lowers it even more. It doesn't bring it to zero, but it's like, wait a minute, these people don't have their story straight. And a couple of weeks ago, we did a whole show on Bible contradictions, and we focused on the birth of Jesus and who was Joseph's father and the genealogies of Jesus, if you just look at the New Testament itself, pretend like it's a true story, you find all these contradictions that mean that at least one or maybe all of the storytellers did.
Bart Ehrman agrees with that statement, and he still uses the Gospels because what he realizes is that while I forget his wording, but he says that while they may be quote unquote unreliable, they still
I can't do that right now.
they still have a
Close the door and get out there. Close the door and get out.
They are still relying on like earlier sources, and they like the crucifixion narratives, right? They don't really have anything, any differences in them at all, except for Matthew reporting the the dead saints rising, but that's not really important for the discussion because we have a multiple confirmation for the crucifixion of Jesus inside the New Testament, which Dan's going to disagree with, but you have to look at the New Testament like you do anything else, and that's not what he's not doing that. He's looking at it as if it's one source, and you just can't look at it that way. You have to look at it like it's multiple different sources.
All right, let's continue.
Didn't get their facts right. They contradict each other. So that greatly drops the probability, including the resurrection of Jesus.
Well, you have your Easter challenge, which we talked about, where you challenge people to take all of the chronologies, the different chapters about the death of Jesus, and
put them into
make one cohesive story, and you can't do it.
Yeah, and even Christian scholars admit, and I quote them in my book, Losing Faith in Faith and in Godless. Even Christian scholars who believe in Jesus admit we can't make sense of the story. There's something wrong with the story, the way it was patched together. It can't all be true. Something's wrong with it. So there's a lot of contradictions in the Jesus story itself, especially the genealogies, which we talked about, and its lack of historical reliability as well. Matthew and Luke didn't get the historical thing straight. So that we can
give an example.
Well, Matthew said Jesus was born during the reign of King Herod, and we know from history that Herod died in the year 4 BC. Matthew said Jesus was born before that, but Luke said Jesus was born when Quirinius became governor of Syria. We know that happened in 6 AD. So they're both looking back in their own kind of distant history, remembering stuff kind of sloppily, and Matthew remembers it this way and Luke remembers it this way.
Well, they're not really remembering anything at all,
they're just trying to give a historical setting for the story of Jesus' birth, and they got it wrong. One of them is wrong.
Both of them are wrong.
Well, yeah, but at least we know there's a contradiction. Mm-hmm. If we had to pick one, Luke tends to be a little more reliable than Matthew. Matthew tends to be just
now, Dan,
all over.
When you talk about reliability in scholars, what are you basing that on? Are you basing that on the Bible or the Scholars Project, people like Robert Price? What are you
mean the mythicists? There are people like Robert Price and others.
But there was that whole project where people rated the Bible and they used colors to show what was.
Yeah, the Jesus Seminar.
The Jesus Seminar.
Oh,
there's a group called the Westar Institute, WESTAR, who are biblical scholars with PhDs or equivalent, who are actual, university scholars who do the research, and they concluded that at least 2/3 of the words attributed to Jesus in the New Testament were not Jesus' words. They did think that about 1/3 of them was authentic. So the Westar Institute, most of them are believers.
So the Jesus Seminar thinks there was a quote-unquote historic Jesus.
Most of them, yeah.
But most of the New Testament is fraudulent.
Yeah, although Robert Price was part of that.
It.
So the Jesus Seminar and the Westar...
The Jesus Seminar is really a fringe.
Okay, so the thing that pisses me off about this is that they'll talk about these people like, okay, they might be fringe, but they are these really intelligent people who are very knowledgeable in their fields. Do you know other topic as people who believe that it's not true, they're very knowledgeable in their field? Evolution. Like there's the whole Discovery Institute. There are tons of creationist scientific organizations, and they're still wrong. Just because they have PhDs in their field and are very knowledgeable, and it doesn't mean that they're right. Yeah, just because there's
Yeah,
this
I mean,
extremely fringe who have PhDs in their field doesn't mean that they're right about it. There's a reason that their scholarship is fringe and not mainstream accepted. Same with people like Stephen Meyer. So yeah, it's just stupid.
yeah,
I'm angry.
the Jesus Seminar is really an interesting thing. You can find they have a book series on Amazon. I wouldn't recommend reading it though because it's really stupid. What they did was they literally handpicked scholars who agreed with them on every conclusion, and then they just like walked around and they're like, "Yo, what did he say this? No, therefore it didn't happen." Like they didn't put any conservative minds in the field. There was no debate going on in there. It was just 75 scholars who thought pretty much the exact same thing. There was no debate at all. Like you can't do that. You have to you have to mix it up. Like the Society of like if the Society of Biblical Literature had done it, it would have been a much more well-rounded discussion. But it was literally just like they handpicked a bunch of people who agreed with them, put them on a seminar, and then we're like, let's go. We agree with this. This is all false. This is false. And you can't do that when you're doing these kinds of things. Two, you might have heard. I don't know if I was muted or not, but I was laughing whenever she said scholars like Robert Price. That should tell you the limited reading of scholarship that they're doing.
That's like saying and PhD biologists and zoologists such as Kevin Ham.
Yeah, that's a very relevant. That's a very relevant comparison because Robert Price is considered to be one of the most fringe scholars out there.
No, yeah, and these people should be treated like creationists and intelligent design people. Very intelligent, obviously very knowledgeable in their field, but they are wrong about this topic. Just because they have these amount of people who believe in it doesn't make them right. And I'm pretty sure there are actually higher percentages of biologists and zoologists who are creationists or intelligent design proponents than there are historians who are mythicists. I might be wrong, though. I need to fact check it.
No. You're definitely correct there because I can only think of 6, maybe 7 who are mythicists.
Yeah,
And I can think of way more than 7 who are biologists who disagree with the consensus.
Yeah, like you can, when you go to their ministries or whatever, they have quite a few people. It's still wrong. All 3 of us here are evolutionists, 100%. But just food for thought in this conversation.
Yeah, it's becoming apparent to me that he doesn't read any commentaries on the Gospels before he makes his conclusions. But I'll let that become more apparent as the video plays on.
And we should take a break for about 30 minutes so we can eat dinner.
All right. I gotta hop off for about 15 minutes.
So who's going to play the...
I think Chris should be able to play it.
Okay. But you're
Chris,
the one whose screen is... You're going to have to make it his screen, though.
Well, he's going to have to share the screen.
Okay. And then go to the 38-minute mark. Or no.
The 15 something.
Okay, so
15-minute mark.
I am pretty sporadic. Like sometimes I pop in, sometimes I don't. But I should be able to stay for 15 minutes at least until JC gets back. And I guess I'll just kind of host Gabe owning Dan Barker. Let me share my screen. Google, what's the video called?
Just look up "Did Jesus Exist?" and it should be the second video with Dan Barker in it. It should be there should be some video above it by some Christian apologist. Yeah.
Yeah.
Now do it.
Okay. Share screen. And yeah.
It's not sure. Okay. Yeah, let me see it. Yep, that's it. All right, now go to about the 15-minute mark and let me see where it's at.
Excuse me, sorry, what did you say?
So make it full screen first off.
Okay, so what time again do I need to go to?
It should be about the 15-minute mark.
15 minutes?
Yeah. Anyway,
Basing
let's
that
see
on-
that.
Are you basing that on the Bible or the Scholars Project? People like Robert Price. What are you
Yeah, you
referring
mean the
to?
mythicists? Yeah, there are people like scholars like Robert Price and others.
But
who,
there was that whole project where people
Yeah,
rated the Bible and they used colors to show what was.
yeah, the Jesus symbol. Although the rest of them would fall more to legend rather than myth, meaning there probably was a historical Jesus, but the stories are legendary, like the Paul Bunyan story. There might have been, but the stories themselves.
Well, so then, and speaking of things that are internal in the New Testament that would tend to make somebody doubt it, what about all the miracles?
Well, there you go. There's that famous quote by Carl Sagan that extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence.
And isn't that a paraphrase of David Hume?
Well, yeah, David Hume said something like that. The evidence has to match the claim.
My IQ has
That's-
dropped 15 points by hearing that claim. Hume.
Yeah, no, Hume's statement was basically no amount of testimony could be sufficient to
A miracle,
prove.
right?
Yeah,
The
which he's
amount of,
wrong.
the amount of evidence that would have to, the amount of physical, verifiable evidence that would have to be proportioned for a miracle claim is impossible in order to be epistemically justified in believing in that miracle. So yeah, that's what Hume said, and that's not to say extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence.
Isn't
yeah.
that called Sagan's razor or something?
Something stupid like that.
And then Christopher Hitchens had Hitchens' razor. Yeah, this is why nobody uses their razor like Occam's razor, because it's not stupid. It's actually a decent.
There is a decent rule of thumb.
Yeah,
Damn it.
yeah. Let's keep going.
Okay, so, a lot of people will extend Occam's razor to ontological claims, which I don't do. I'm pretty against that, but I do think it's a decent rule of thumb in things like history and scientific investigation. But let's continue to own these guys.
I mean, others have said that, but I like the way Carl Sagan said it. And these are extraordinary claims. People, magically multiplying the food in just a few minutes, and walking on water, and healing people, and
Spitting in an eye to heal blindness.
Yeah, there was a blind man, and Jesus said, "You're blind." So Jesus knelt down and he got some mud, spit in the mud, and he stuck it on the guy's eye, and his sight was returned. Well,
there's mud in your eye. That's where that phrase comes from, I guess. In your eye.
And
I don't think I would care to go to Jesus, the ophthalmologist, myself.
So what honest historians say, even honest skeptics say, we're pretty sure that's not true.
Well, and then let's talk about some of the
Hold up.
miracles, but also why did Jesus supposedly drive a demon into a whole bunch of innocent pigs?
Yeah, pause that.
Right? Yeah. Drive them in and drive them off into a cliff, and so they died.
Yeah, because the demons came out of these people, out of this demoniac.
How many pigs?
I don't know how many pigs.
A herd of pigs.
Yeah.
And why would you do that? I mean, if you're a Lord or God and you can have miracles, and there were demons, why wouldn't you get rid of the demons?
Yeah,
why would you kill the pigs?
Well,
and why would Jesus get so mad at a fig tree? Remember this story about a fig tree, and he's hungry apparently, and it's not fig season.
Yeah.
And he gets mad that there's no figs for him to eat, so he withers the fig tree.
Yeah.
This guy walking around is quite scary, actually.
But
wait a minute, hold up, pause that. Yeah, the dude walking around, healing people with sicknesses is scary.
Damn,
because he killed a couple of pigs and killed a fig tree.
This is high quality Christology right here. Yeah.
I personally wouldn't want to go to Jesus the ophthalmologist, even though he can, cure blind people.
Yeah, but the thing about these claims that they're mostly just appeals to intuition, right? Just appeals to phenomenal conservatism, possibly. That how could Jesus be God if he did this thing that seems mean to me? Well, there really is nothing substantial backing that. I don't think. Okay, so mostly when we say that it's unlikely for Jesus to be Lord, or is likely for Jesus to be Lord based on certain character traits or actions, we have to have in mind a prior notion of what we would expect for a god or for a divine being to act like, and what we would not expect for it to be like, right? And so we make certain claims about, oh, this is evidence that Jesus is not God. This is evidence that Jesus is God. We have to have in mind what this evidence would look like, right? And so to say that it is evidence against the fact that Jesus is God by the fact that he cast out the demons and they went into a herd of pigs and that these pigs jumped off a cliff, that this is evidence that Jesus is not God, we have to somehow say that this is... We'd have to have in mind some notion of what would serve as evidence against Jesus being the Messiah or being God. And somehow this evidence would have to qualify. But I'm not really sure how that would be the case, right? In order to say, oh, the deaths of these pigs, Jesus driving these demons onto these pigs, is evidence that he is not God. We'd have to have an idea of why this is the case, right? Because I don't personally, in my intuition, this doesn't seem to be evidence that he's not God, right?
Or him killing a fig tree.
Right, yeah, that's a whole different story. But by cleansing this man of the demons fleeing into a herd of pigs, and then pigs jumping off a cliff, I don't see why this is substantial evidence against Jesus being God. We would have to see a more robust argument for that to be the case. In that sense, then I would then provide a stronger theological case for why it's not evidence against why Jesus would be God, right? But for now, this is just a pretty weak appeal to intuition. Why would Jesus do that? Or why would Jesus do this thing? He must not be God. It's not a very robust argument, if you understand what I'm saying. And the part about the fig tree,
Jesus was obviously, like...
that you could read the text at such like a basic understanding that Jesus was just mad at the tree. There was no deeper symbolism or theological meaning conveyed. He was just mad at the tree. The tree just made him angry.
It's Treebeard from Lord of the Rings.
Yeah, it's not a symbolic representation of Israel or the elect versus the damned or God's divine punishment. No. He's just mad at the tree. That's totally what's going on. Nothing else. It's just ridiculous. Yeah.
He does.
A lot of apologists and theologians say, well, that was just a story because the nation of Israel was withered and the nation of Israel wasn't bearing fruit. And so there was going to be a prophecy of the end. You know what I mean? It was like a story to make a point.
That's kind of what you just said.
Real story. Yeah. But back to the demons, a lot of scholars have noted that, like the book of Mark, they were all...
Just to say really quickly, I love how he said, oh yeah, they say this in response, and he doesn't even argue against it. Like, he just accepts it. Hold on one...
Huh? Okay. Your audio cut out. Chris, your audio cut out. Chris, the audio cut out. Okay. Chris, the audio cut out. That's probably something stupid anyways. Yeah, I don't even know what this is, why those points were relevant to did Jesus exist.
So I need to go really quick. I'm back now. So were you able to hear all that?
No, I don't really think. I think he was just elaborating on the pigs thing, though, so it's not really important.
Was it your audio?
Oh, no, I couldn't hear any audio.
Oh, yeah, I'll go back.
It's probably just him talking about the pig story anyways.
Yeah, I still want to see it, though.
Most scholars have noted that, like the book of Mark, they were all written in Greek, right? There are many stories in the book of Mark and in Matthew and Luke as well that parallel almost episode per episode and word for word stories that appear in Homer, in the Odysseus.
Oh,
There's a
here it
place
comes.
Homer goes out in the ocean and he calms the storm, and then he sees the Cyclops, and then he casts out the demon out of the Cyclops. Or there's. Then when you see in Jesus, he gets on a boat with his.
Wait, did he say Odyssey?
He just said that Homer in the Odyssey cast out demons from the Cyclops.
Odysseus never cast out demons in the Odyssey. What is he talking about?
You know what he does to the Cyclops? He pokes his eye out.
No, yeah, he gets a hot pike and stabs him in his eye while he is sleeping, right? And then
he runs away. And then he said that my name is Nobody. And so he's like, he runs up to them and he's like, nobody poked my eye out.
Yeah, no, because I read the Odyssey 3 months ago, and this did not happen in the Odyssey. Imagine you just go up to like an English professor.
Wait! Look at his face. How you paused it?
he's really getting into it. But like, imagine he just goes up to like an English professor yelling. He's like, "I love the part in the Odyssey when Odysseus casts the demons out of the Cyclops and he calms the storm."
Yeah, no, you can't draw any parallels to the Odyssey because all of the entire part of the Odyssey is literally the gods like trying to kill Homer.
Yeah, Poseidon's trying to kill Odysseus the entire time.
Yeah, and then he like has to go to the that special other god to get the winds to calm down so he can go home, and then like somebody else like pops up and like makes him go back again. Like it just keeps going. It goes on forever. Where this guy, he makes this god angry, and then this god is happy. Like I don't see any parallels in there to Jesus casting out demons into pigs.
This is such a stupid argument. This is literally, if evolution happened, then why are there still monkeys? That's the level of argumentation.
Let's keep going.
Disciples, and he calms the storm, and then there's this possessed person, and he casts out the demons, and they go in, so you can see that everybody knows that if you were an educated Greek writer in the century, you were schooled on Homer. Homer was the textbook, the Odyssey and the Iliad. Everybody read it, everybody knew it. All those stories were the common currency. And so you can see in the book of Mark, many stories, the feeding of the 5,000, that story happened in the Odyssey as well. You see some of those stories. Why are the stories in the New Testament? Part of the reason is that,
I don't remember Homer feeding 5,000 people.
I remember the feeding of the 5,000 in the Odyssey. Maybe that's because... What? What is he talking about?
Maybe he thinks Homer gave bread to his troops, and he yeah. That's yeah, no, he's gonna say scholars say this is written in Greek. That's actually that's the one true statement he said, but I don't remember scholars then going and saying all of these are parallels in the Odyssey. Because they don't say that. Nobody does.
My IQ has dropped 50 points watching this man speak.
Yeah, bro, you know that story about the Cyclops?
They're floating around from the writings of Homer before that.
So, speaking of the character of Jesus, though, things like renouncing his mother, and refusing to do things that some little thing for her. I guess that lend itself to the whole legend and myth, but it does make you wonder, why is there so much energy on making sure that there was such a person when there were so many things that Jesus said and did that are harmful, that you should become a eunuch for God, for example, castrate yourself.
What?
Did this woman just say that the Bible teaches that you should cut off your testicles to worship God? Can you show me the Bible verse where this is said?
Hey, give him some credit. This is coming from people who think that the Odyssey has demons being cast out of cyclopses.
Oh man. These people are obviously very knowledgeable on their classical literature. Yeah,
Man, I want to get my friend who's going to be a classical historian on here to watch this.
have you ever read do you own Robert Alter's Old Testament?
No.
I really want to get it. It's supposed to look at the books of the Old Testament as literature, and I hope that by reading that I'll get a better understanding of classical literature. That in the Odyssey, when he casted the demons out of the Cyclops.
And he
Well,
calms the storm.
So, not that Jesus didn't exist, but that a good Jesus didn't exist. He might have existed. He might have been a jerk, you know.
But, well, because you tend to only hear the more palatable things.
Yeah.
God is love.
What?
That's about Jesus. But when
Yeah,
you really
Jesus was definitely a jerk, even though he ran around healing little kids and stuff.
Well, we know that from history and from modern days that some of these cult leaders were not always that attractive in their teachings and in their personal lives. So there might have been this weird.
Do you know why they got cult followers? Because they were attractive and charismatic. Stupid. Jeez.
He can't even get his modern history right, and he's trying to tell us about it.
Yeah, I think maybe if one is some cult leaders are weird, aggressive people. Sure, some of them are jerks. Some of them are weird. Some of them have bad home lives or whatever. That does not mean they weren't charismatic and attractive. That's why people liked them. That's why people flocked to them. That's how the psychology of it works. And not to mention the fact, I would like to point out that a Christian could easily make a pretty strong argument that the reason we get mad at Jesus and think that he does things that were moral is because we are so deep in our sin that our minds can't judge what is morally right. And so because of the fact that we are so fallen in sin,
moment.
yeah, exactly. We're so fallen in our sin that the acts of the holy, divine God-man, Jesus Christ, appears to us as evil or morally wrong, which makes sense, right?
Yep.
I saw a really good quote from somebody who said, if you read the New Testament and you aren't at times annoyed or outraged, just really frustrated at Jesus, then you don't understand how deep you are in sin. And that got me to think, right? And I think there was another quote from Martin Luther where somebody said, "Do you hate God?" And he said, "Do you love God?" And he said, "Love God. A lot of the times I hate him. I am so deep in my sin that it is natural for me to hate God at times, right? I try to love him, and since I am regenerated by the Holy Spirit, I am able to love God and understand that he is holy. But there are times that as a sinful creature that I do hate God. And in order to accept that is to understand how fallen and sinful we are. And I think that's true. We all hate God. I hate God. Many times in my life, I understand that God is holy, and in that sense, I do love God, and I try my best to love God. But as a fallen creature, we inevitably will end up in our lives hating God sometimes. So I don't think this weakens the case against these actually making Jesus not divine, because it just fits in with the Christian argument that Jesus is divine. It's this would also be expected under both theories. So yeah. Anyway, let's continue.
Yeshua character who was sexist and patriarchal, which was the currency
believed in
of the
slavery.
day, and who believed in.
Did he just say Jesus was a sexist, even though he was one of the only people to include women in his ministry during that time?
This is a fun stream, but we're done now. This is too stupid for us to even watch. Bye, guys. That was fun, Gabe. See you later. Sadly, we have to continue the stream.
Yeah. Did he just say Jesus was a sexist, though?
Yes, he did.
But Jesus was one of the only people during that time to include women in his ministry.
Yeah, exactly. Women played an extremely important role in his ministry. They were accepted in his ministry.
He also said he supported slavery.
Yep.
Even though, you know what? I'm not talking about it.
You're too angry.
This is worse than me getting. This is worse than the times that I've sparred with Richard Carrier.
Yeah. I hope everybody watching knows that Gabe has dunked on Richard Carrier in over email before.
Yep.
Let's continue.
demons, and the mental illness was demon possession and all of that stuff.
And also who called non-Hebrews dogs.
Yeah.
Gentiles were dogs.
Yeah.
So there's sort of a bigotry there.
Yeah. So it still doesn't disprove that he existed historically, but it's still.
But maybe not worthy of worship.
Yeah. And so we're talking about, did he exist or not?
So when you do these debates, another thing that I know comes up when you're trying to explain the New Testament is so-called natural explanations for people's myths.
Yeah. And so historically, in the scholarship historically, there have been a whole bunch of attempts to try to explain the New Testament stories as just misinterpreting actually really natural things that happen. Like demon possession would be a way to misinterpret mental illness, right? You would think, well, and so the death and resurrection of Jesus, some people have supposed, and I don't put a lot of weight on a lot of these, but they propose, for example, Jesus didn't really die, he just passed out. And they put him in the grave. And
ooh, that would be terrible.
Well, yeah, and then later they came back, hey, he rose from the dead. And that's why they used to have wakes, remember? Because people would die, but you wanted to wait 2 or 3 days to make sure.
They thought they were dead, but they weren't as good at confirming it. Right?
And so they wanted to wait for a few days. They would wake up. They would have these wakes. So
hey,
one
JC's
of the
back. Hold up.
hypothesis.
Yeah, JC, you missed a lot. So Dan Barker thinks that in the Odyssey, Homer casts out demons from Cyclopses.
He said that in the Odyssey, Odysseus casts out demons from Cyclops.
Totally, that's absolutely what happened, bro.
And that he calmed the sea, even though he went to the what's her name? He went to some wind or sea goddess or something
No,
to like help him.
No, Circe. Hold on.
Yeah. He went to somebody to help him because Poseidon was like making all these storms and stuff to try to kill him.
He was trapped at Circe's island. Circe was
Yeah.
the name, and Athena.
Okay.
Zeus sent Hermes over there to get Odysseus out. Then he came home and killed all the suitors. Huh. Based and killed. Okay, so can we switch the screen? I want JC to control it now.
Yeah.
Hold on, I gotta bring it up. What's the time?
But the timestamp
Is 22 minutes and 6 seconds.
Yeah, no, this is just he said that she just said they didn't have ways of confirming that people were dead as good back then. No, they did. We only have two. I think it's either 2 or 1 instances of somebody ever surviving crucifixion, and
Wait, 22 what?
It was 22 minutes.
Okay.
Yeah, we only have 2 instances of somebody ever surviving a crucifixion. It's recorded by Josephus, and I don't know which book. I believe it's the Jewish War. Yeah, it's probably the Jewish War. But he says that 3 of his friends were falsely crucified. He went to go make his case that they were falsely crucified. They believe him. They pull all of them down, but the damage had been so badly done on one of them that the best medical professionals at the time period couldn't help him, and the other 2 survived, but they were severely injured for the rest of their lives. So, and then Jesus obviously didn't get the best medical care at the time, so and he also went through floggings and all that other good stuff. So, and the spear, if you want to throw the spear and the side in there. I'm pretty sure he's dead. I'm pretty sure they knew he was dead because the Roman legion was very very good at killing people.
That was their job.
Yeah, and if they didn't kill them, then they got killed. Actually, I think it was every 10th person, and they lined them all up, and then every 10th person in the legion got killed. I'd be the guy who, when they started counting off, I'd be like, am I the 10th person? Then I'd be like, hey, can I trade places? And just like move. Yeah, but anyways. Yeah, that's about the spot.
Okay. Let's see.
They would wake up. They would have these wakes. So one of the natural hypotheses is called the Swoon Theory. And there's others that he was put in the wrong tomb, or that somebody else was crucified in his place, that he had a twin brother named Didymus, which means twin, who was actually killed in Jesus. I mean, there's all these other ways to try to explain the stories with natural hypotheses, which I think the problem with those is that they give too much credit to the text. They give too much credit to what the New Testament says, as if it was actually true what they said and believed. But we need a national explanation for it.
Yeah,
right?
hold up.
Jesus
I
walked
guess
on water.
Bart Ehrman gives too much credit to the text.
You can think of
The lake
natural.
was frozen in the Middle East.
Well, it was one of these freak cults.
Yeah,
What were
I
you
guess
saying?
I said I guess Bart Ehrman definitely gives too much credit to the text. Yep.
Yep, because Dan Barker knows more than Bart Ehrman, you know? Obviously.
Cold spells, who knows? Nobody's proposing that. I'm just saying that you can always think of, if any miracle story, you can think of some natural way to explain it. But one hypothesis that I do like, and it's just a hypothesis. It's not, when you go into history, you can't prove it. They didn't write, here's what we were actually thinking. But Robert Price brings this up, disconfirmation, he calls it. So here was this cult leader named Jesus. He was crucified. He did die. The disciples were really upset about it. His followers, like, he died. He was supposed to bring in this new kingdom, and he died. And so the day after Good Friday is called Black Sabbath because the disciples were all black, and then Easter Sunday follows.
They were all mourning,
black,
you mean?
Black. They were all just like in total dark mood. Just imagine if your whole world fell apart, everything you believed in didn't happen, and it's just, he's dead now, right? So Peter, who was the lead disciple, on whom the whole Pope and Catholic Church is based, Peter had lied the night before. He had denied Jesus when they asked him, do you know Jesus? And he denied. And Robert Price's hypothesis is this kind of like, suppose you and your spouse had a big argument and you said some things that you really regretted, and you say, oh, I'm sorry, I'm going to go apologize. But the person dies before you can say anything, before you can apologize. The person's dead.
Well, let's not do that, Dan.
Okay. At least let's not argue on this show. And so Peter must have been feeling like on Black Sabbath, oh my goodness, he's dead, he's gone. I didn't get to apologize. He was my Lord, I loved him, and he's gone now. He's our leader. And so Peter prays, dear Jesus, I'm sorry, I apologize, please forgive me. And then he feels forgiveness. And he feels like, wow, yes, Jesus. So Jesus is up in heaven somewhere, and he's praying to him, right? And it's just like modern Christians think that Grandma died and Grandma's in heaven, and you can say, Grandma, I'm sorry I didn't say this. You know what I mean?
I'm sorry, but I'm getting a slight sense of absurdity in this, because aren't we? I recognize it's important to debate this, but aren't we giving an awful lot of credence to fairy tales? Would we sit there and analyze Hansel and Gretel?
God.
They might have existed.
No, hold up. This is now I actually understand his hypothesis. Okay, so he denies the vision. He denies any visual experiences whatsoever. He thinks that Peter ran up and he was like, "Yeah, dude, I talked to Jesus," and then everyone else was like, "Yeah, dude, I did too." What? There's so much explanatory power. It's not even funny. It's not going to explain the tomb. It's not going to explain Paul. It's not going to explain the group experiences listed in 1 Corinthians 15. The dude is unaware of any scholarship, and it's kind of funny that he cited Robert Price, that I don't even consider an actual scholar. So, but that may just be.
But he has a PhD. Actually, does he? Yeah.
Yeah, he does, but he doesn't teach at a university. So, I mean, let me just that hypothesis is not discussed in the literature at all. It's even lower than the hallucination hypothesis, because at least the hallucination hypothesis tried to account for the visual experiences. This hypothesis is just like, oh no, it's like when you talk to your dead grandma. What? It's not going to explain Paul. I don't think that Peter would have had a grief-induced thing at all, because you have to look at the context whenever this was going on. What was the Jewish belief that about the Messiah? Was it that he would die? No. So Jesus would be. You can even see the disciples' belief, like kind of doubt about that. Whenever he tells them that he's going to die, they're like, "What? No, you're the Messiah." And that was just the mindset that they had been brought up in, because the mindset was the Messiah's coming in. When he comes in, he's going to kill all the Romans. He's going to kick them out. It's going to be our kingdom. We're going to rule forever. But punishment for being a false prophet was immediate death, and you were cursed before God. Punishment for being a false Messiah, though, was way worse. It was that you were cursed, you shouldn't be remembered, nobody should care about you, you should be dead, and you're going to hell. God curses you, don't have anything to do with you anymore. Bye. Kind of attitude. And we should expect, again, like he said earlier, it's based on probability. It's more probable that they would have resulted back to that type of reasoning than, boo-hoo, he's dead. I'm sorry, Jesus. Then I talked to Jesus through prayer, therefore he resurrected, completely ignoring the verbiage that is used there about anything regarding vision and things like that.
All right. Oh, what's up? We're just going through a bunch of stuff by, Dan Barker.
I told you it goes into the Easter stuff. So it is relevant.
Maybe there really were breadcrumbs left. Do you know what I mean?
Okay, but get the story. I mean, all it has to be is plausible. It doesn't have to be true. It has to be just because other myths have arisen. Look at Jehovah's Witnesses. Look at the myth of the Elian Gonzalez thing. I mean, human nature creates these things out of something.
What's the myth of Elian Gonzalez?
Remember this little Cuban kid who was rescued, and they...
I remember him, but what was the myth?
Well, that there were these angels, dolphins that were floating with him, and the Virgin Mary was walking the streets of Miami. People were getting healed. I mean, just within a couple of days, this whole myth thing arose out of basically nothing. So it is human nature for very quickly for these kind of ideas and excitement and myths to rise.
Well,
so
if you have no ballast or anchor in your intellect for deciding and discerning whether something seems plausible, anything is possible.
Yeah.
And as my mother liked to say, one can speculate endlessly about the non-existent. Isn't that what's going on in a sense?
Okay, well, let me finish the hypothesis. This isn't truth. This is just a plausible hypothesis that Price and others have put forward. So Peter prays and he feels better, and he tells his friends, I talked to Jesus and I'm forgiven. And they say, you talked to Jesus? He's dead. But I talked to him. You mean he's not dead? He's alive? He's lived somewhere? He's alive and he rose to heaven. So you can
seem so far.
Okay. 10 billion issues, but I'm going to only hit on a few. First off, the account says that most of the disciples, if not all the disciples, were there when he descended into heaven. If we're taking, the Gospels at prima facie, so, face value. But also, you got to realize the tradition back then. They probably, now, I can't speculate too much because we don't really 100% know, but they probably were very disappointed in Jesus. And due to their traditions, they had to see it. They believed when you said resurrection, they believed that everybody, the dead, the other Jewish people would rise. So Jesus just rising and being gone just seems stupid to them or silly. So
yeah, and that the thing is, this doesn't answer any of the accepted facts whatsoever. It doesn't accept Paul. It doesn't explain Paul's conversion. Jesus, Peter, in that hypothesis, wouldn't have thought he was alive. He would have thought he was in heaven, as he said earlier. I mean, what? And then, I guess I can tap on something NT Wright taps on, which you kind of alluded to as well, that Jewish belief was that when you died, your spirit went to heaven, and then it waited for the final resurrection. If that happened to Jesus, which is what Peter would have been experiencing, then he wouldn't have been like, oh yeah, dude, he's alive again. He would have been like, no, he did what everybody else does, so he wasn't the Messiah. That would have been the idea that would have probably went through Peter's head. Not, woohoo, he's resurrected.
Woohoo! Let's go start a whole entire religion.
And then you got
hey,
Paul,
guys,
you got his skeptical
just
brother
imagine
James.
like these ragtag fishermen who's everybody thought was crazy, especially because this is supposed to be on the Sabbath. So you have thousands of Jews there. Everybody thought they were crazy. The guy had just been crucified. There was Romans there. He was humiliated. They were humiliated. And so they're just going to go like, ooh, yeah, guys. Like a bunch of ragtag fishermen are just going to go walking down the street being like, he rose from the dead. And Jewish people are going to be like, sure, all right.
Yeah, no. Imagine that, like, them walking down the streets with, like, that I'm staying alive, like,
Yeah.
I'm staying alive.
That's not how it probably would have gone. I mean, I can't say for sure, but
I mean, you got to look at what he said earlier, though. Good Homer cast out demons from a Cyclops.
all right. Let's continue.
Far-fetched, Dan.
Yeah, but that's far-fetched things happen in cults.
But I mean, the whole thing is far-fetched, isn't
Yeah,
it?
it is.
You don't really believe there was a historical Jesus, is that
I
right?
think the probability is so low that there wasn't, and there's other good reasons for that.
Oh
but
my-
I'm just saying,
So, hold up. So he's like going totally back from the beginning. The beginning, he's like, there was possibly, you know what? There was probably someone. And then now he's like, nope, the probability's too low. And
The probability is not. I wouldn't even consider it a probability. I would consider it one of the most certain, what Bart calls it, one of the most certain facts of history is that Jesus did die by crucifixion. And if he died by crucifixion, then he had to exist. Unless you're going to throw Richard Carrier around like, no, it was in space.
yep, it was all in space. You know, them aliens, you know?
Elon Musk shot Jesus to space.
Elon Musk said Jesus to Mars. We live in a simulation.
Yeah. I mean, the probability of him existing is so high. This dude is literally like saying scholars, but the scholars the only scholar he cited is the Jesus Seminar and Robert Price. And both of those are extremely dishonest and fringe. So, yeah, I mean, the Jesus Seminar may not be quote-unquote fringe, but it was dishonest in the choosing of the scholars that put on it. Intentionally put, like, every most liberal scholar on there. And Robert Price was on that panel, so that should tell you how low they were willing to go.
All right, let's continue with this masterpiece. I feel like the lady over here is like even worse than he is.
That's his wife.
I know. I feel like she's worse than he is. She's like, whoa, don't give it that much credence because, yes, that's going to totally just destroy you.
Yeah, just deny all critical scholarship. Because that's a good thing to do for being a skeptic.
Yep, just deny everything.
Be like, gee,
being a skeptic is so much easier than being like defending something because you're just like, nope, I don't have to accept that.
I'm just not convinced. No, it's even worse. Dan Barker was cited by Aaron Ra as a Christian theologian and a Greek scholar. Oh, I remember that video now because he was like, definition of faith, and then he like cites like
Dan Barker.
he cites Dan Barker as a pastor.
You're like, yep, totally a scholar.
No, the thing is, this is what that guy commented on the GE video 2 days ago. He was like, if you can't beat them, just deny that they existed.
Exactly.
That's kind of what I think Dan's doing. He knows anybody go watch the Mike Lycona debate with Dan Barker. It's really funny because Dan Barker's like, it was probably probability wise, Jesus was probably crucified on a pole. And then he says something like the cross doesn't appear for like 4 centuries or something. And then Lycona's like, dude, what are you talking about? The cross is used in graffiti. It's used in here. And then Dan's just like jaw drops. And then, yeah, but go watch that debate. Even though it's 4 hours long, it's a massacre.
There are plausible natural hypotheses to explain how maybe this story could have come out of something, right? And that's one of them that could have happened. Those things do happen. We know in history that people brains
right, but we don't even know that there was a Peter, for example. So this whole thing
no. Oh, we go with the Peter mythicism. Just disciple, literally, just like if you can't win, just deny they existed. Like, no,
we
Mars.
don't even know. Every scholar on the planet accepts this, except for like Richard
Muhammad
Carrier.
didn't exist, man. Like
Every critical scholar, Peter and the disciples existed and had this group experience. Dan Barker, what random dude on the internet can I find that denies this? Oh, this PhD that's unemployed. Bam, that automatically shifts the critical scholarship.
no, just like we don't even know if they existed. We just have writings of them.
All we have is that one eyewitness dude, Paul. But we don't even know that he existed because well, we just don't know. I mean, I'm gonna apply this skepticism to Julius Caesar. We don't know Julius Caesar existed because all we've got is writings about him. This is just so stupid. But we're making this video to show you first off, show you how dishonest this is, because at the beginning of the video, the entire first 13 minutes was just complete lies. Most of this video has actually been lies. And I think it's telling that he has such a big audience, and they're going to him for views about scholarship. And then he's feeding them lies, and then they go on the internet believing that. It makes me kind of angry. I feel so
bad for the guy who believes all of this. The guy who's like, "Oh yeah, Dan Barker,"
yeah,
and shares with all his friends. He's like, "Dan Barker debunked the Gospels."
Imagine Dan Barker on physics.
Here's the thing, though. They always accuse apologists of being, oh yeah, apologists are supposed to know quantum physics and everything. Well, obviously, quantum physics and everything. Apologists do go too far. They try and know everything, and they think they know everything. But atheists do the same. They think they know Greek history and ancient history and physics and philosophy and theology. And, you can be well-versed in all, but you're no expert in all of them.
I want to debate that RN guy on did Jesus exist.
All right, let's continue.
All we have is those New Testament documents. If you take them at face value, you can find natural explanations, but I think that's, like you say, I think that's stretching it a bit too much.
Well, I think that leads us to another point, which is Jesus is legend.
Well, first, back to myth. There's myth and there's legend. There's also...
Is there a difference?
Yeah. Myth means he never existed at all. Legend means like the Paul Bunyan story. He might have existed, but then the story is a legend, right? Like you talk about a historical person can have a legend on his life based, right? But the pagan parallels. There's many things in the story of Jesus that parallel many other pagan stories of God men coming to earth who are being persecuted by the leading powers. They're then put to death, and then their followers revere the grave. And born of a virgin, anybody who was anybody in those days, if you're going to have this new religion with this person that you believe is a god, then they had to be born of a virgin or born of some like Hercules was born of
which is very sexist.
Well, yeah. Or not necessarily born of a virgin, but with Hercules, it was a divine birth. It was like a snake.
So anybody who's anybody has to be born of a virgin.
Well, anybody who's a god has to have these god characters to them, so you'll know it's a god.
And also, we haven't talked about the sun gods. I mean, you've talked about parallels, but what are there? At least 25 sun gods that.
Oh my! That's an overstatement.
They all have this parallel kind of miraculous virgin birth.
And then the 12 disciples and the 12 houses of the Zodiac.
So he's even going farther than Richard Carrier.
Richard Carrier says that this is
dumb
crap.
Yeah.
He says that there's only 2 parallels, and the rest of them are stupid.
And those 2 parallels don't even make sense.
Yeah,
so,
and those 2 parallels are like hand-picked stories of the many of them. So I don't even know what to say about the thing about the parallels is that the first Christians were Jews, and they hated pagans. So they're going to copy their Messiah off of the people that they hated.
Yeah, man.
You know, you got Mark over here, and he's like, yeah, man, that pagan story. You know I hate those guys, but man, I just love that. We'll just throw that in there. Like, what? And the virgin birth thing, some of the times by virgin birth, they mean they're born out of rocks.
Yeah.
And I don't
or
think
they're coming from like underworld, or they're like, coming out of certain, like, it's not like they were actually born of a virgin. They're like,
he said Hercules wasn't born of a virgin. He literally, and he was only a demigod because, you know what? I think I'm getting the Disney version mixed up with the actual story, but anyways. And his name actually isn't Hercules, it's actually Heracles. But I didn't expect Dan Barker to know anything about Greek history.
all right, let's continue with this miraculous video.
Zodiac,
and they
all
get
of those.
sacrificed. That seems to be the main thing.
And there's a big theory about how Christianity came basically from the Egyptian astrotheology and the stars and all that. And you can kind of see that. There's 12 disciples, and there's they have their different houses, and in the age of Pisces at the time. So the fish symbol was a symbol of Christianity at the time, coming to the age of Pisces. So you can see a lot of that stuff. And I don't think any of that totally disproves the historical Jesus. I think what all that does is it just drops the probability way, 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 way down. But you mentioned legend, and
Jesus is based off of stars.
So here's Richard Carrier moment. No, so here's my issue: is you could find parallels in the Greek gods with anybody. You could find parallels between Alexander the Great and gods. You can find parallels between Julius Caesar and gods. You can find parallels between this guy and that guy. You can find parallels between Muhammad and this guy. But it doesn't deny that they were historical figures. And that's what I get mad at. Is that it's just, oh yeah, they didn't exist because they have parallels. Well, some of the gods have parallels with trees. Like,
trees don't exist. Yeah,
but
no. The parallels thing is just, most of the parallels are like hand-picking specific verses out of one version of the story, then picking another version, and then picking another version, and then picking another version, picking another version, picking another version, and then excluding all of the differences, and then going, yeah, Jesus was definitely copied off of that. Come on. Like, it doesn't lower anybody's probability. I mean, I can find parallels to the Titanic sinking, doesn't mean it didn't happen.
Now, I think we have to be careful because they're going to bring up, well, Jesus was miraculous, but I feel like when we're talking about the historical Jesus, then we're not taking into account his alleged miracles. So pointing out parallels is like pointing out parallels between Julius Caesar and the
Genghis.
god.
Julius Caesar crossed like a river, dude, and it was a pretty big river. You know who else crossed the river? Genghis Khan, dude. Oh, Julius Caesar was a myth, and like Kublai Khan was like, an emperor, and so like, so was Julius Caesar, and they both were like really good at conquering stuff. So Julius Caesar didn't exist. Yep, that's how it works. But in all seriousness, I think anthropologists have noted that similarities don't mean anything in humanity. It's just natural for humans to have similarities with things.
Well, think about it, though. A lot of these Greek gods were based off of, trees and rocks and mountains and thunder and lightning. Like, does that mean these things are less likely to exist? No. No.
Yeah, Zeus resembles lightning. So lightning was obviously copied off of Zeus. So lightning, I'm a lightning mythicist, dude. Lightning is a myth. Oh,
I've
so
never
are
seen a lightning bolt, therefore I can't believe it.
Yeah, so those trees, like, they don't exist. You're just like imagining them. You're just hallucinating them.
All right, let's continue.
I tend to think myth is very likely, but legend is much more likely, because if you look at the entire first century when these documents were written, we have the first thing written was Paul. First thing about the resurrection was Paul in 1 Corinthians around the year 25. Then you have Mark around the year, not 25. Paul was around the year 55, about 25 years later after the events. Then you have Mark around 80, Matthew around 80, Luke around 80, 85, somewhere in there, after the temple was destroyed.
Did you just say Mark around 80?
90 or so.
80.
So here you have this big
Hold on, let's go back.
These documents are being written. If you have 985, somewhere in there. And then you have Mark. First thing about the resurrection was Paul in 1 Corinthians around the year 25. Then you have Mark around the year, not 25. Paul was around the year 55, about 25 years later after the events. Then you have Mark around 80, Matthew around 80, Luke around 80, 85.
Who dates Matthew to 80?
Right. And then John, like around the year.
Him.
Yeah, the conservative date for Mark is 60, and the liberal date for Mark is 70, not 80. So, dishonest.
Isn't the conservative date like?
No, so the conservative
60?
date, there's two technically. Most conservatives will date it to 60, but some of them will date it to 50, and the reason is because like it mentions the one part, I forget, it lacks Mark lacks the part about the temple being destroyed or something like that. I don't remember.
All right, let's continue.
There's 90 or so. So here you have this big stretch of time when these documents are being written. If you look at each one of them and count up the number of extraordinary events, like Carl Sagan said.
I bet there's a lot.
Well, but what you will see is that in the early ones...
Okay, I already know where this is going. He's going to point out how he thinks that the miracles progress, when in fact, I have a chart somewhere, they do not. They actually decrease. The only thing that progresses seemingly, prima facie, is the Christology. That's the only thing that really
they
progresses.
They do progress in some cases, but in some cases they also decrease.
You're right. So in like John, the miracles surrounding the resurrection insanely decrease. Well, not insanely, but they decrease by a lot. So they kind of balance themselves out, right? They kind of
Yeah.
record things here, they record things there. So I don't
Like
think
you
that's
would
really,
expect eyewitness statements to do.
yeah. I mean, this is
I
just
hate
kind
to
of,
sound like J. Warner Wallace there, but
well, J. Warner Wallace does a pretty good job.
yeah. We should probably make a whole series on like gospel reliability later, but David Wood actually has Dan Barker wrote about like a paper or something on this, but then David Wood like completely destroyed it, and he wrote like a response paper to it, showing instances where the miracles decreased a lot, and there were a lot of instances. So I mean, the argument goes, this is a two-edged sword. I mean, it can go both ways.
Yeah, it's just kind of ad hoc, honestly.
We've still got
There's
18
very
minutes.
little. In fact, in Paul, you don't have a bodily resurrection. When you come to Mark, you get a little bit more. And then as you move later in the first century, Matthew and Luke, more miracles and more stories. And then when you get to John, you see, he said, even if all the books were written, could not contain what Jesus did. And so in the book of John, you have all this huge, so you can actually see a growth through the first century of legendary embellishment as time passes over those decades.
So say Paul doesn't believe in this theory is so stupid.
I forget the word anatheis, something means to stand up. Yeah, the word Paul used means to like stand up or sit up, which I'm not sure how you apply that to a vision. I mean, I'm sure Carrier could figure out a way. Maybe he like sat up in space or something. I don't know.
To give him his credit, there are a lot of scholars who do try to. I think Dale Allison is one of them, and so is James D.G. Dunn, which I respect both of them a lot. But I don't think there's a verse where it says that he says that I'm gonna try to find it really quick. Let me find it. This is why everybody who is going to be a Christian apologist should read Michael Icona and N.T. Wright. On this issue, preferably N.T. Wright, because that's kind of what his whole book is on. Is on Pauline interpretation. You got like a ton of really good scholarship on that. He's also got two massive. His magnum opus is actually on what did Paul mean when he said certain things. Trying to find it. All right, Romans 8:11, I believe, says, and I quote, "Now, if the spirit of the one who raised Jesus from the dead dwells in you, the one who raised Jesus from the dead will give life also to your mortal bodies through the dwelling of his spirit in you." Which is interesting because Paul also calls the resurrection of Jesus the first fruits. Which means basically it was first. It was the first of what's going to happen. Now he says that. Now in Romans 8:11, he says that the spirit of the one who raised Jesus from the dead, will give life to your mortal bodies. And there are 5 occasions outside this passage where Paul draws a close connection between Jesus' resurrection and the resurrection of believers. 1 Thessalonians 4:14, 2 Corinthians 4:14. 1 Corinthians 6:14, 15, 12 through 23, etc. The word, I'm using Michael Icona right now, but he gives a word analysis of the Greek word, which translates life-giving. It appears in contrast with the flesh and the mind and the spirit and such. But that seems too direct to me to be some sort of spiritual resurrection.
So that's why I always you do have people who kind of point out the first fruits as some type of apocalyptic messaging. I'm not going to go into that right now, but I think you can't have the apocalyptic side where you believe Jesus was an apocalyptic prophet and it was a spiritual resurrection, because it doesn't work that way. So I you could see where, Paul obviously believed not necessarily that
probably somewhat that his vision was physical, but more so that Jesus' resurrection was physical. And so that's why you see a lot of skeptics going at Paul's experience, not Paul's belief in the physical resurrection.
Yeah.
And so,
Also, I'm going to add another verse just to back it up. It's Philippians 3:21, and it says, "He will transform our humble body to be in similar form to His glorious body, according to the working of His power, even subject to all things to Himself." Which my hypothesis about the resurrection is that Jesus' mortal body was raised, but it was what he says in 1 Corinthians 15 is that it goes down in corruption, raised in glory, where yes, our mortal body is raised, but it becomes a quote unquote new a new body. So it's kind of hard for me to believe that Paul believed in some sort of spiritual resurrection, given common resurrection beliefs at the time, given the Pauline corpus in itself. So that's a big issue with Dan's first source that he lists. I kind of stole your thunder there.
yeah, that's fine. All right, let's continue.
Which is what happens in any human legend that's growing. It starts out simple, very simple, unadorned, hardly any miracles. There was no angels at the tomb. There was no bodily resurrection. There was none of that. But then you have an angel at the tomb. Now you've got two angels at the tomb. And now you have earthquakes, and you have the eclipse of the moon over here.
And zombies, practically.
And that stuff's not in the early ones. In the early documents, you don't have that stuff. And then then there's even more stuff that's not in the New Testament. The Gospel of Peter has a huge giant cross, and Jesus' head is up in the clouds, and the cross is coming out of the tomb speaking, which is pretty fantastic stuff. I mean, it's like later stuff gets more and more fantastic.
So this is the apocryphal.
Yeah.
Right.
So, but what you can see is that in the telling of the story across that first century, there's an obvious growth of the story as it gets more and more. So that's legendary growth. That's the footprints of a legendary growth from maybe an actual kernel that's true, or maybe not. If you're a mythicist, you say the kernel's not even true. If you follow legend, you say, well, the kernel might have been true. There might have been a Jesus, but this later stuff. And the mistake a lot of Christians make today is they take the New Testament and they look back through history through the lens of John and Luke and Matthew, as if the whole thing was just happened flat, and they don't see the growth, they don't see the distortion that happened in later years.
So where does Bart Ehrman fall on this Jesus myth or myth man or legend, is it?
Yeah. So Bart Ehrman Bart Ehrman thinks the New Testament Jesus probability is really too low to be taken seriously. But he does think the probability of the historical Jesus is over 0.5. He thinks it's high enough for us to say, yeah, there was a man named Jesus.
I wonder if people who aren't used to this terminology, when I hear you say historical Jesus,
okay, how is we're 30 minutes?
No, it's not over 0. He doesn't say stuff like, no, it's over 0.5. He pretty much says, no, you're an idiot if you don't agree with that. That you don't think Jesus existed. He has a quote where it goes, "There is no scholar in New Testament, ancient history, early Christianity, classics, any related field that doubts that Jesus existed." And he says,
what I'm surprised at is that she is still confused as to what he's talking about, and you're 30 minutes in. She's like, wait. So we need to clear up what the historical Jesus and the biblical Jesus.
They don't mean there was a Jesus who performed miracles.
Exactly.
They mean there was this charlatan or deluded person who went around and had a
or maybe
false,
just a teacher, or what would the original Paul Bunyan have been? He would have been.
To be fair, there's a book out there by Paul Meyer called the Historical Jesus 5 Views. One of the views that's listed is that he was the Jesus of the New Testament. So they're not even engaging in the debate. They're assuming it's already won when it's really not, because scholars like N.T. Wright, Craig Keener, Daryl Bach, Rob Webb, Michael Icona, Craig Blumberg, and a bunch of other scholars who are Christians argue for the New Testament's reliability and its relation to the historical Jesus. He's just assuming that no, this is already over, when in reality it's a massive discussion that isn't going to be ended by any weak-minded fool like Dan Barker.
Wow, Gabe. Harsh. All right, let's continue. Oh, I can't with this anymore.
Kind of interesting. I suppose a big guy with an axe, but he wouldn't have been doing these fantastic stuff. So the historical Jesus is
man. Jesus is man.
It's a human being who may have existed or not, right?
So then I have another question. I didn't realize that crucifixions were really very common, were they?
Well, yes.
What? No. Oh my gosh. No, it's not like they killed hundreds of thousands via crucifixion. No, it's not common at all. Come on. How do you not? This is like, where are these people getting their information from?
I learned this stuff in Sunday school.
What? Well, let's see.
Public executions were common.
Not necessarily.
But not on the T-shaped.
What? You can't. No. He can't be serious.
He actually is, because he debated Mike Licona on this, and he's probably just mad that he got completely destroyed on this, because we have early signs of early like necklaces of people wearing T-shaped crosses. We've got early graffiti instances of people using T-shaped crosses. I mean, this dude is just so ignorant of history. It's not. I don't even know if I should be laughing or not, or wondering if he should be in some mental institute getting help. I'm honestly like flabbergasted at how.
How do you not? There thousands of people were crucified on a cross.
No, bro, they didn't use a crossbeam. It's just a public execution on a pole. Yep. This is why Tim O'Neill exists, because people like this, who are like, yeah, we're the rationalists. We're here to have rational discussions. Oh, you think Jesus existed? No, you're stupid. Like, this is exactly why we need more people like Tim O'Neill who can actually correct the atheist community, and then we can actually have a discussion with them. Like, come on, get with the program. This isn't high school history where you can just throw your thoughts out there. This is scholarly debate, and you have to get your facts right in order to even participate, which you have gotten nothing correct in this entire video. I know I'm being harsh, but I mean, it is what it is.
All right, let's continue.
So, and even the Bible doesn't talk about a T-shaped cross. It talks about a stavros, is it? Which is more like a stick.
Yeah, the word crucify in the Greek.
Oh my God!
Which is where we get the word staff, or like a stick. What they would do is they would impale people, just stick them up above, so they're suffering, they're bleeding.
That sounds terrible.
And that plays into one of the New Testament stories where his side was pierced with a sword.
What?
Right? Supposedly hanging on the cross.
His side was pierced with a spear.
When the blood didn't come out, water came out, apparently, which is weird. So
that's actually not weird. That's a medical.
But the whole idea of.
But was crucifixion common, or was it uncommon?
Public executions were common.
But I'm asking about the crucifixion.
Well, we don't have any evidence that the Romans used that T-shaped cross. There is one in the catacombs. There is one little picture of a goat, like it's on a shaped thing. A goat being crucified.
Oh, dear.
So the earliest evidence we have of a T-shaped crucifixion, and the word crucifixion in Latin comes through the word cross. It's a crus, right? The Greek word isn't crus. It's just stake.
This is just dishonest, because we have people's bones where they were nailed to a cross. They have nails in their hands. They've got nails in their feet. The inscription says that they were crucified on a cross. Does that ring a bell to you, Dan? I don't know. Maybe it's because you read too much Robert Price. I guess he didn't listen to his Lycona debate because he didn't respond to any of Lycona's points that he made about the evidence for the crucifixion. He kind of just passes them off in that debate, which is evident here. I mean, it would be funny in this video if he made a point against eyewitness memory because he clearly doesn't have any memory of that debate. I'm sorry, it's not a debate, it's a massacre.
But the earliest evidence we have is like in the 6th century. Before that, the Christians used the fish symbol and the shepherd as their symbol. They didn't use the cross. They didn't have cross necklaces. They didn't have crosses on their buildings. They didn't even have buildings.
And I also feel like
we have people's necklaces from before that time.
Implement of torture. You know, even if you followed somebody and you felt there was great suffering, why would you do that?
Yeah,
it's desensitizing. But if there were public executions like this, and they were common, many people suffered, not just a Jesus.
Yeah, and so Christians today should be wearing a stake, not a T.
Or maybe they should just drop that kind of torture.
Yeah,
torturous jewelry.
It'd be like wearing an electric chair around your neck,
right?
You know, to show that somebody was executed.
Ruth Green, who wrote our Epiphras, Born Again Skeptic's Guide to the Bible, always said that Easter was a terrible time for her as a child because there would be that image of this tortured, agonized person, and why would you revel in it? You know, there's
the reason
very desensitizing about
I wish Chris was on here
right
now to explain the doctrines behind that, because I'm wondering how Dan could have been a pastor and not know any of this. The reason why is because God's Son came down to die on the cross, and that was the only way possible that we could ever attain salvation. That's why we celebrate it. It's not like we're celebrating, like, sure, he died, and he died a very agonizing death, but we're celebrating the fact that what he achieved. We're not celebrating the fact that he died. It's what he attained through death is the symbolism. I'm flabbergasted that he was once a pastor. I wonder what he preached in his sermons.
Obviously, he doesn't know the theology very well.
Oh yeah, but he's definitely a theologian according to Aaron Raw.
Yeah, Aaron Raw's also an expert in philosophy according to him, so can't.
Blood dripping off the side of the
So that was also part of the later evolution of this legend.
Yeah, but centuries later, the idea that he was publicly executed or crucified has some credence, and that's why Bart Ehrman and other historians who doubt the legend, who doubt the New Testament, they think that self-proclaimed Messiah probably was publicly killed, that he probably did exist and he was publicly killed on a stake, right? Put up to die. And that, in their minds and in Bart Ehrman's mind, that lends credence to the whole idea that person could have existed, although throw out the New Testament, but there might have been.
Just kind of like what Thomas Jefferson did.
Yeah.
He threw out everything that he thought was supernatural in the Jefferson Bible. Well, I think we've covered this topic. Do we have any questions?
Well, let me see if we have questions from... So how do I find the questions on here? On Docs?
Hey, look, it's like me.
Oh, here they come. Okay. Okay, here's a question from Corey Melton. I have heard Bart Ehrman say many times that his reason for believing Jesus was a real person was because Paul met Jesus' brother, James. To me, that seems like such a fragile leg to stand on. I can think of a handful of reasons immediately that could explain reasons for them to fabricate that, or for someone to have pretended to be Jesus' brother. Sure, there could have been Jesus. Why not if we one day find evidence for that? But for there to be so little evidence for historical Jesus, why do you think a scholar such as Bart would accept such seemingly
But it's all on epistemic credence, right? He's a historian. He has to go off of the amount of evidence that is usual for that realm of work. They can't put historical documents into test tubes and be like, look at this, Jesus existed. Like they have to go off of their the epistemic acceptance of the norm. So yes, they doesn't take as much evidence to convince them of something as it would to convince a scientist of, let's say, flying saucers, or well, that's probably a bad example, of a new color. Like there's just kind of it's all about epistemology.
little evidence to make such bold assertions. Okay, so in all fairness to Bart, I think what Bart is saying is that the probability is high. I don't think Bart is saying we know 100% that Jesus did exist. I think.
Well, I don't think any scholar would say that. You can know almost nothing besides like mathematical truths of 100%. So
Yeah.
obviously, almost every decision we make ever in our lives is based on probability. So yeah, that's probably what he's saying.
I think when historians are honest, they have to take all sorts of things into account.
Is he an historian or a Bible scholar, or is it the same thing?
Well, he's both. Yeah, he's a Bible scholar. He's a highly respected Bible scholar, and he spoke at one of our meetings,
Yes.
right? So, and we've had him on a radio show.
He got our Emperor Has No Clothes
And his
award.
books are wonderful, and especially what he shows that there's a lot of fraud and there's a lot of forgery in the New Testament. But even with all of that, even though Bart Ehrman does discount the crazy miracle working New Testament Jesus, he thinks there was a real person. And it's not just James, it's also the crucifixion story. And he's also alluding to the fact that Josephus, in addition to that little probably interpolated passage about Jesus that shows up that wasn't real, there's a later passage that does mention James, the brother of Jesus. So Josephus does mention Jesus had a brother named James, which means that there would have been a Jesus if James was the brother of Jesus. Although in Josephus' story about James, it contradicts what the New Testament says about James. So,
but what you're saying is Bart Ehrman doesn't pin all of it on the brother.
He doesn't pin it all on the brother.
Okay, I forget exactly what Josephus says about James. Didn't he say something about? He mentions James as being like a preacher of some kind.
He says that he was a preacher who got executed. The story is that some priest wanted him dead, and the like governor or something of the area was on his way back to prevent it from happening, but he was too late when he got there, and they had him beheaded.
Yeah.
He kind of gish-galloped over that, though. Instead, he kind of pawned it off as a point against the Gospels instead of seeing how damaging it is to his position.
Yeah, I mean, I even addressed this somewhere else, but not in this video, but I addressed this where Carrier and people like Godless Engineering people have certain ways of trying to get around that, but I don't think any of them actually work. So,
Brother of James. So yeah, and I think we have to be honest. None of us should be looking for 100% or 0%. We should all be looking for what is a sensible probability here.
Okay, we have some more questions.
Yeah, we do. Okay, Connor Allen is asking, why are there no stories about Jesus when he was growing up? You hear about him as a baby, and then bam, he's a fully...
That's not true. There's a story about him at the temple when he was younger. And you also got to realize the gospel writers are trying to highlight the main parts of his life.
Well,
so
yeah, that's what
they're not going to talk about. Jesus, he went to school, or Jesus, he did homeschool this one day. Like,
yeah, this is what you said about godless engineering. You're looking at it through modern eyes when you really have to look at it through Middle Eastern eyes from the time period, and you knew that. You find out that biographers did this quite often. They would show this guy's birth narrative, and then they jump straight over to the main point of his life because they didn't really care about what he ate for lunch that day, right? They cared about the main bulk of his life, which is what we find in the Gospels, the important stuff, not the. Well, one day when Jesus was a schoolboy, he ate a ham sandwich for lunch. Like, I mean, that's a terrible example, but
And even if we
you get what I'm
say
saying.
he went to there's a story about him getting lost and talking with the temple leaders for a couple days, right? They could consider that big because that kind of showed off his knowledge and his coming ministry and everything. But they didn't need to record everything.
Yeah, how much time do we have left?
7 minutes.
Yeah, let's just end it here. I think we've covered all of his actual points that he's going to make. But in short, he is a liar who propounds these ideas as the main consensus of scholarship. He shouldn't be listened to. You shouldn't watch him, and that's really the point of this video. And happy Resurrection Sunday.